Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a little bit different than normal. It's going to follow the same vein as my thoughts on, while being a little bit more condensed between each title. I've talked about or done Let's Plays of a few RPG Maker horror games on the channel, including the Strangeman series, Mermaid Swamp, Insanity and Paranoiac, Eve, Mad Father, The Witch's House, and a few others. While I am a fan of the genre, I recently have felt very much like I've barely scratched the surface of the games that are out there, so I've kind of been on a quest to play as many as I could and report back. This will be a bit of an ongoing series. I don't want these videos to be crazy long, so I don't really want to cover more than like 5 games in a video. But even that's like the upper echelons of what we'll be doing. But there are definitely more than 5 RPG Maker games that I haven't played. So yeah, I've been in a bit of a gaming slump lately. I have been quite a bit sick for the last few months, and I've been experiencing a little bit of like being a gaming dolphin, where I kind of jump to one game, play a little bit of it, get bored before jumping to the next thing. Nothing has really grabbed and held my attention, so I came up with this idea not only as a means for me to explore the genre a little bit more, and also shine some light on maybe some lesser known games, but also as hopefully a way for me to get back into the swing of playing games in general, because a lot of these RPG Maker games tend to be on the shorter side. How this video is going to work is I'm going to have a spoiler-free section of each game where I talk about where you can find the game, the price of it, and a general synopsis, just in case you want to play the game yourself, and then a spoiler section where I talk about the game in a little bit more detail. Everything will be marked, so never fear the spoilers. So yeah, that's been my preamble, and let's get to talking about some of the games. I'm kicking things off with the game Anne, which released on August 26, 2021. The game was made by Jason H., who goes by the name Wrong Wrong, and described the game as a love letter and a homage to the golden age of horror RPG Maker games in 2012. For that reason, the game is available for free on Steam. However, you can support the game and the creator by purchasing the digital art book, also available on Steam. Side note, but I really appreciated the creator highlighting that the reason they made the game free was to be reminiscent of all the games they paid respects to, like Eve, Ao Oni, Mad Father, all of these fantastic games that were available to all regardless of their financial circumstances. That was one of the biggest reasons these types of games appealed to me as a kid. They were a means to connect with a compelling story at a time when I didn't have the means to buy games. Don't get me wrong, obviously creators deserve to be compensated for their time, and making a game takes a lot of work, and depending on the kind of game, costs a lot of money too. But on the flip side, it's awesome that creators can release their games for free and allow everyone to enjoy them. Anyways, Anne is about a digital art student who gets trapped inside her school when she accidentally breaks the school rule of not staying on campus past 9 p.m. Luckily, she has the help of a security guard as she tries to escape the school. If I had to compare the game to anything, it is seemingly, to me, very, very heavily inspired by Eve and Misao. The game seems to combine elements of the two. There are 5 different endings, and it took me about 2 hours to get all 5 of them. The game includes puzzles and exploration, but I find it does lean very heavily into chase sequences, especially as you approach the end of the game, so if you're not a huge fan of those, I might pass. That's kind of all you need to know, so let's get into some deeper discussion. As I mentioned, the game seems to be inspired by Eve and Misao, and I will now explain why I feel that way. I'll start with what I think is the Eve inspiration and then the Misao inspiration. So to kick things off, while Anne does take place inside a school, the school in question is an art school, so a majority of the things chasing us down are living artworks of various forms, be it music, fashion, painting, sculpting, and the like. Now, if you're at all familiar with Eve, you know that it takes place in an art gallery. I do like how Anne takes the concept of living artwork, but puts a unique spin on it by making it more of a collective than an individual. Not every piece of artwork in the school is derived from one person in the way that Eve is, allowing there to be a greater range in the intention and creation behind each piece. Obviously, even art made by the same creator can and is completely different with each piece depending on the artist's intentions, feelings, and technique used to express those things. Even where the artist is at in their life, a piece that they make at the start of the career is going to be vastly different from one they make at the end. But I think the combination of both many different creators and many different mediums in which there were to express those feelings gave a lot more leeway to like truly run wild with what could happen in this school and like what could be chasing us. Now that brings me to Security, the deuteragonist of the game. He initially tells us that he was hired by the principal in order to assist those who get trapped in the school. He and Anne become fast friends because trauma bonding as they make their way through the school. As it turns out, Security is actually a painting created by one of the students and goes through the lengths he does to save Anne because of the intention his artist put behind creating and naming him. That contrast between many of the hateful artworks we had seen up until this point, like Failure for example, was a very beautiful contrast that again heavily articulated how different the pieces can behave based on their creator's actions. On the topic of Security, their role in the story was almost married between that of both Gary and Mary from Ebe. Security, being a resident of the school as well, fills the role of being something that is otherworldly and perhaps dangerous, actually acting as an obstacle later in the game, much like Mary and Ebe. Of course, as the player, we mostly are never given reason to doubt Security, but from the perspective of Anne, we can see reasons why she would doubt him and potentially be afraid of him. On the flip side, he also fills the role of being the protector, someone we can trust and share the experience of the haunted school with, much like that of Gary. So, in a nutshell, to me, the setting and characters take inspiration from Ebe, but where does Misao come in? Well, that can be explained by discovering the origin of the cursed school. As it turns out, Hannah, a student of the academy, notices her friend Clara is acting odd. After seeing Clara speak with the principal, Hannah follows them to the parking garage and overhears that the principal has essentially made a deal with Clara that he would assist her with her grades and finances in exchange for her sleeping with him. And apparently Clara is not the first girl he's done that to. Hannah records the entire exchange and what happens in the principal's car, and then confronts him as soon as Clara leaves. The principal tries to defend himself, saying that what he's doing is consensual and therefore legal. No sir, it's not. You hold a position of power and you are coercing her. Hannah rightfully calls bullshit and tells him she's going to the police, and in a moment of rage and desperation, the principal strangles Hannah to death. He hides her body in a locker in the parking garage, tells everyone that an emergency situation has come up and they all need to leave the school. He returns to where he hid her body and finds that he can no longer open the locker. He tries to leave the school, but finds it to be the perverted version of it we know in the game. The principal realizes that every night, at midnight, the school takes on its cursed form, hence why the no staying in the school past 9 p.m. rule is instilled. So long story short, we have a teacher who took advantage of their students, who murdered a student in a school that is cursed by said girl until the culprit is brought to justice. Very similar to Misao, although I will say that the principal in Anne, in my opinion, is a lot less interesting of a character than the teacher in Misao. I will say that while in most games where we're in a cursed or haunted location, it is obvious to come to the conclusion that something must have happened in order for the location to become cursed or haunted, it's always a little bit interesting to see how common it is to be due to the suffering of a younger girl. Moving away from just Anne in specific, in my experience, many games have a female protagonist, and usually the haunting entity is a girl as well. I think this is an interesting phenomenon which could be due to a multitude of reasons. It could be because of the stereotype of girls being seen as weaker or more vulnerable. It could be a way to add tension into the game through the physical traits of the girl. For example, in Anne, she has trouble moving the heavier statues due to her smaller stature, hence making the chase sequences without Security to be a little bit more stressful due to her slower moving speed, something that couldn't exactly happen if our protagonist was an adult man. It could also be related to the gender of the makers of the game as well. While many choose to remain anonymous, some choices of the character's gender could be due to their personal experiences. There's obviously no one-size-fits-all answer, but I think it would be fun to play a few more games with a male protagonist. Circling back to Hannah, there are of course real-life incidences similar to that of both Misao and Hannah, but every time it comes up, I still look at the culprits and ask, truly, can't we just be normal around students? For the love of God. I will say that when they begin revealing Anne's backstory and showing us her troubled home life, I did think that she would have some experience relating her to Hannah. I thought maybe that was the reason why Hannah observed her for most of the game, and the reason why Anne was the one who was able to access the principal's office and learn the truth. It was going to be like some big reveal that Anne had gone through similar traumatic experiences, which might explain her quieter disposition as well. I was overthinking it though. Anne does have a troubled past with both her parents essentially abandoning her and shipping her off to an orphanage, but she thankfully was not a victim in the same sense that Hannah was. I mentioned earlier that there are 5 different endings for Anne, something I enjoy immensely, but I do really like the progression of each ending. It's incredibly easy to get all 5 endings in one playthrough with minimal effort, and I like how as you progress through each 5 endings, you get a little bit more information. Granted, ending 2 and 4's outcomes are pretty similar for Anne. The only difference in ending 4 is Hannah does burn Security's painting, effectively killing him. Now, really, the ending I want to talk about the most is the true ending. In the true ending, Anne convinces the principal to come to the school, Hannah is able to get her revenge, and Anne and the 2 other students who are trapped in the school are able to leave and go home. Before leaving, Anne takes a picture with Security. In all the other endings where you escape, Anne has no recollection of her experience in the school. However, in this ending, Anne remembers Security through the painting of him and the picture she has, and is able to recall what happened. This is one of my favorite things to be included in true endings because, in my opinion, I find forgetting things to be one of the saddest things to happen to a person. To live a full life or to go through an experience, and despite it being scary, it still being meaningful to you through what you accomplish and the people you meet, only to forget it is so sad to me. Looking at it from another perspective and in the context of these horror games, it might be a mercy or a blessing to not remember what you went through, and thus never need to heal or recover from it. But I also think the growth the character usually goes through and the people they meet are worth remembering, and it's very sad when things are forgotten. So yeah, that has been Anne. I really did enjoy the game for what it was. It truly did feel like a great homage to older RPG Maker horror games, and it brought back those same feelings I felt playing Eve and Misao and The Witch's House. So yeah, definitely give Anne a try. The second and final topic of discussion for this video is Aria'S story, which released on September 7th in 2019. The game was created by Lydia and is available on itch.io, and it's a pay-what-you-can sort of deal. So you can play it for free, but you can also name your own price to support the creator. The game follows Aria, a young girl who loves to read, who gets trapped in her local library overnight and finds herself in a strange version of the library where the books are sentient beings. She's followed by a strange woman who dubs herself the narrator, and it seems like a lot of things in the library outside of the books themselves are trying to kill her. Aria makes her way through several genres in the library, starting with comedy, then moving into fairy tales, followed by romance, and finally horror. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of this game. It's an exploration puzzle game that I feel while it does technically fall into horror, it's definitely more unsettling than anything. I really enjoyed the library setting and the usage of each genre to make the areas unique and memorable. The fairy tale chapter in particular was really fun, simply because fairy tales are so universal that many could be referenced without fear of the average player not knowing what was being referenced. That wasn't the case with the other chapters. They were a little bit more vague, but I still think each area really captured the essence of their genre and was really fun to navigate through. But yeah, let's get into some of the spoilers. The real mystery surrounding the library itself are the people inside it. We're introduced to a boy, Lewin, early on, who appears to be around Aria'S age, who is intent on killing her. He later joins Aria after saving her life, and by saving her life, I mean that he throws a knife at her, misses, and it happens to hit the scary rabbit monster that's chasing her and trying to kill her. So Aria believes that he saved her life intentionally, and asks him to join her. He spends, I'd say, about half the game with Aria and grows to care for her, because how could you not when she's like literally the sweetest girl ever? As Lewin travels with Aria, she in turn learns more about him, like his fear of heights, the fact that he's a writer, and more about his generally cold personality. In other words, they end up becoming quite close, and I really do like how the game develops their relationship, especially from Aria'S perspective, seeing as she, like us, the player, don't know Lewin's motives or his past relationship with Arya that would cause his radical change up from killing her to not doing so, and how he's involved with the library and everything. The narrator, who I mentioned earlier, is also rounded out a bit during some scenes away from Arya. She speaks to a blonde man reporting to him about everything Arya is doing while in the library, but it isn't until much later that she regains her memories and remembers why she's doing that in the first place and who she really is. The blonde man himself is named Clyde, and he seems to be the mastermind behind everything, but honestly, they keep him rather mysterious throughout the entire game. I think the game is interesting in the sense that it feels very much divided into two sections. The first 3.5 chapters are very much a typical horror puzzle exploration with hints to a greater mystery and narrative, and then the last half of chapter 4 and the final chapter is where shit gets real. As we move into the final chapter, we get what is the branching choice of this game that affects the outcome of what's going to happen at the end. This game has several endings. I did not get all of them myself, but in the original game there were 2 endings, the normal and true ending. And in the latest version of the game, which I played, they added the perfect ending, the good ending, and 2 bad endings. So in total there are 6 different endings you can get. The branching choice is that Arya comes to a pink door and is given the choice to go in or not. If you do not go inside, that locks you into the normal ending no matter what. If you do go into the room, you discover a copy of Arya's room, and inside it a photograph of the 4 people in the library. Clyde, Lewin, narrator, or Dahlia as we later learn her name is, and Arya herself. Arya, after seeing this photo, has a really bad headache and seems to remember something very important, but they do not reveal what that is. Upon leaving the pink room, Lewin returns and you're given the choice to tell him whether or not you went inside the room, so to basically tell the truth or to lie. After that, Arya is confronted by Clyde on her own and he asks her 3 different questions. There are correct answers to these questions, and in answering them correctly, that also leads to certain endings. The first ending I got was the normal one, where Arya doesn't go into the room and thus doesn't remember anything, and she just leaves the library with everyone, and they live happily ever after. Next, I got the true ending because it felt necessary, and you do get a lot more drama in this ending. You learn in this ending that all the little clues meant a lot more than they seemed, like the fact that Lewin is an author and likely created the library we're in. Everything suddenly clicks into place when we learn about Clyde's magic quill that can create or erase anything that's written. All of these little clues suddenly make a lot more sense when Arya reveals that she remembers her death. The Arya we've been playing as is not real, but rather a creation of a grief-stricken teenager. If you make all the correct choices, Arya decides that she doesn't have the right to replace someone who was real. She steals the quill from Clyde and erases herself and the other library. Not before she has an incredibly heartfelt goodbye with Lewin, and in the real world he's finally able to finish writing the book that the entire library and the fake Arya is based on, which he dubs Arya's story. Even though this ending is a little bit sad, I really do like that it's the true ending because I think it represents a very important side of grief. In this ending, I think that Clyde and Lewin are able to find closure from Arya's death in a way that I don't think would ever be possible in the normal ending. I like that they're able to honor their friend through this novelization of her life and with it find the closure they need to not necessarily ever really move on, but to be able to live without drowning in their grief. The only other ending I got was the good ending, which is achieved by lying to Lewin about opening the door and then answering all of Clyde's questions correctly. In this ending, the details of Arya's death are revealed. She was murdered by a hunter in the forest in an accident. The killer flees and is never caught, and Clyde is the one who finds her body. Arya laments that her life was cut short and insists that she wants to keep living, but not as Arya because she isn't her. Clyde and Lewin work together to write her into the world as a person with amnesia, so she can start fresh and become her own person. 3 years later, they succeed, and Lewin finds her in the forest and introduces himself. The only detail she remembers is the name they gave her, Wendy, and she goes on to live her own life. As I mentioned, there are 3 other endings in this game, but I did not get them myself as I found the process to getting the endings in this game to be a little bit tedious. And I figured I kind of saw what I needed to see. The game also gives you access to a bonus area that has a bunch of additional content that you can view as a fun little extra thing. I have to say that while this game wasn't that long, I did find it to be a little bit of a drag. I had a hard time getting invested and actually finishing it, but I think that was more to do with the pacing rather than the game itself. I really enjoyed the characters and setting. I really liked the twist ending, especially in its relation to the grieving process and how different people react to tragedy. Overall, I thought it was a really fun, bite-sized game that you can kick out in an afternoon, so I would 100% recommend it. In conclusion, that has been my RPG Maker game discussion for today, so let me know if you played either of these games and what you thought. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.